Earlier this year, I took a month-long trip to Southeast Asia. As I was searching the internet for things to pack, every website said to make sure to bring sunscreen. I went out and bought sunscreen that had SPF 70 in it because I didn't want to deal with the nasty sunburn while I was carrying my backpack across the country. In Asia, I took my sunscreen out, and a new friend from London started laughing at me because she said that SPF 70 is unheard of back in the United Kingdom. I could see where she was coming from, seeing as she was using SPF 8. But was being protected from the sun really something to laugh about? Protecting yourself from the sun's rays is an easy way to live a long and happy life. My favorite place to be is at the beach, and I know that if I want to keep enjoying the beach, I have to protect myself from the sun. This has led me to do plenty of research on ways that I can take precaution against the sun's harmful rays and still enjoy being outdoors. Sun exposure is something we all have to be aware about because according to the American Academy of Dermatology, about 1 in every 5 Americans will develop skin cancer in their lifetime. By being informed of the risks of sun exposure, people will be able to be proactive and take action against the sun's rays. Getting a little bit of sun seems harmless now, but the risks of sun exposure are still there. There are many risks associated with sun exposure, including skin cancer and sunburn. The biggest risk of sun exposure is skin cancer. The American Cancer Society states that skin cancer is the most common type of cancer, and as mentioned before, about 1 in 5 Americans will develop skin cancer during their lifetime. Skin cancer begins when skin cells start to grow uncontrollably. Skin cancer develops in the outer layer of the skin, known as the epidermis. The epidermis is made up of basal cells, squamous cells, and melanocytes. Squamous cells are the outermost layer of cells, and these constantly shed as new ones develop, while basal cells are in the lower part of the epidermis, and these divide to form new cells which eventually become squamous cells. According to the American Cancer Society, basal and squamous cell cancers, skin cancers, are the most common of skin cancers and are directly related to how much sun a person has been exposed to. This is why it is common for these cancers to be found in parts of the body that have been exposed to the sun, such as the head, the neck, and the arms. But they can also appear in other body parts. These types of skin cancers usually don't spread and are very treatable. The third most common type of skin cancer is also the most dangerous. Melanoma develops in the melanocytes, which are the cells that give your skin color by producing melanin. Unlike basal and squamous skin cancers, melanoma tends to spread to other parts of the body if not treated early enough. There are many types of skin cancers, yet most of them are caused by too much exposure to ultraviolet rays, also known as UV rays. Exposure to UV rays usually comes from the sun, but there are other ways to be exposed to them. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention defines ultraviolet rays as an invisible kind of radiation that comes from the sun, tanning beds, and sun lamps. The American Cancer Society says that ultraviolet ray exposure depends on the strength of the rays, the length of time the skin has been exposed, and whether or not the skin was protected with sunscreen or clothing. It is important to keep in mind that sun exposure adds up day after day, and it happens every time you are in the pool, not just when you go to the beach or the pool. Another risk of sun exposure is sunburn. Many of us don't go outside hoping to get sunburnt, but there are times when we lose track of time and end up bright red. The staff at Mayo Clinic say that sunburn, or red, painful skin that is hot to the touch, is a result of too much exposure to UV rays. Kelly Bramlett Blackburn, author of What Happens When You Get a Sunburn, writes that when ultraviolet radiation from the sun reaches the skin, it damages the skin cells and causes mutations in their DNA. She goes on to say that the sunburn will heal itself, but some of the surviving cells will have mutations that could eventually become cancerous. Even though sunburn seems to come and go, it is actually causing a long-lasting damage to the skin. Sunburn can be a precursor to skin cancer because the long-lasting damage the skin has received during a sunburn increases the person's risk for skin cancer. Cancer Research UK found that by getting sunburnt once every 2 years, you are tripling your risk of having melanoma skin cancer, which I mentioned before is the deadliest one. There are many risks associated with sun exposure, but there are just as many precautionary steps you can take to enjoy the sun in a smart way. It is easy to be protected from the sun as long as you seek shade, cover up, and use sunscreen. Two big ways to protect yourself are clothing and seeking shade. The American Cancer Society offers ways to protect yourself from UV rays, one of these being clothing that covers most of your skin. The most protective pieces of clothing are those that will cover most of you up, such as long-sleeve shirts and pants. Light-colored clothing will offer less protection from the sun than dark-colored clothing. The Skin Cancer Foundation recommends clothing as the first line of defense against UV rays, because clothing absorbs or blocks most of the radiation that would otherwise reach your skin. Keep in mind that if you can see light through a piece of clothing, it is most likely that UV rays will penetrate it too. Besides clothing, seeking shade when UV rays are the strongest, which is usually from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., is a preventative way to limit your sun exposure. Seeking shade is an obvious solution to avoiding sun exposure, but make sure you aren't around water, sand, or snow, because they tend to reflect UV rays back up. If you think you're protected from above, make sure that you're also protected from below. You can also create your own shade by wearing large-brimmed hats. These hats can offer protection to your face, neck, and ears, unlike baseball caps, which only protect your face. We can't forget about our eyes. Wear sunglasses that protect against UV rays because the American Cancer Society says that research has been shown that long hours in the sun without protecting your eyes increases your chances of developing certain eye diseases. Another way to protect yourself is by using sunscreen. When choosing a sunscreen, it is important to know what you are buying. The sunscreen bottles are labeled with an SPF number or sun protection factor. The higher the SPF number, the more UV protection that it offers. This 50 SPF right here would offer more protection than this 30 SPF right here. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends using a broad spectrum sunscreen with an SPF of at least 15. When using sunscreen, make sure that you check the expiration date on the bottle. Although most sunscreens last 2 to 3 years, it is good to keep a more recent one on hand as it may be more effective in protecting you. It is also important that you apply sunscreen correctly. Sunscreen bottles offer application instructions, which are usually on the back of the bottle, and these directions are the best way to apply sunscreen. Don't be afraid to use generous amounts of sunscreen and to apply it in areas where you might forget about, such as the top of your feet and your ears. Lips also tend to burn, so make sure that you have a lip balm that has SPF in it. Reapplying sunscreen is a good way to prevent sunburn. Sunscreen wears off when you sweat or swim, even if it is water resistant. A good rule of thumb is to reapply sunscreen every 2 hours, especially if you've been swimming. Although sunscreen offers protection, it shouldn't be used as the only way to protect yourself from the sun, because no sunscreen fully protects you. Wearing full coverage clothing, seeking shade, and wearing sunscreen are all easy ways to protect yourself from the sun's rays. It doesn't take much to protect yourself, which is why I encourage you to protect yourself from the sun now and not have to worry about the consequences later on in life. It is important that you continue to enjoy the outdoors in a way that will allow you to live a long and happy life. Excessive sun exposure might not seem like a big deal, but it could lead to skin cancer and maybe early death. You will decrease your chances of being one of 5 Americans who have skin cancer during their lifetime if you start to protect yourself against the sun by covering up and wearing sunscreen. Next time you're at the beach, hoping to get a tan, and start to feel sun-kissed, just remember that your tan will fade, but the damage that you have done to your skin will always be there.